For the first time in the 77-year history of the NATO alliance, a sitting American president has threatened military force against a treaty ally to seize its sovereign territory. Not behind closed doors, not in a leaked memo, on live television, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, with NATO Secretary General sitting just feet away. On January 21, 2026, Donald Trump told the world he could take Greenland by force. His exact words, "We probably will not get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be. Frankly, unstoppable." Then he paused. "But I will not do that, okay? Let that sink in." The President of the United States publicly acknowledged he possesses the military capability to invade a NATO ally, chose not to exercise it, and framed that restraint as a concession. Here is what most people are missing about what happened next. Hours after that statement, Trump announced he had reached what he called a framework of a future deal with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The tariff threats worth $302 billion in trade leverage, set to begin February 1st, were suspended. The military option was taken off the table. Crisis averted. Except nothing was actually resolved. Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen responded within hours, stating flatly that NATO Chief Mark Rutte cannot negotiate on behalf of Denmark over Greenland. Greenlandic parliamentarian Aja Chenmits posted a single devastating line. "Nothing about us without us." The people whose territory was being discussed had not agreed to anything. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Denmark had already done. Between January 19th and 20th, Denmark deployed over 200 elite Arctic combat troops to Greenland, led personally by General Peter Harling Boysen, Chief of the Royal Danish Army. They invoked a 1952 standing order that requires Danish soldiers to immediately take up the fight against any invasion of Danish territory, including by American forces, without waiting for orders from Copenhagen. The same week, Greenland's government distributed guidance to civilians recommending they maintain 5 days of food supplies. This was not symbolic posturing. This was preparation for actual invasion scenarios in an Arctic territory where supply chains can collapse overnight. And Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said something no NATO leader has ever had to say publicly. If the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including our NATO, and thus the security that has been provided since the end of World War II. Read that again. A NATO ally explicitly confirmed that American military action would trigger Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause, potentially forcing NATO members into a war against the United States itself. This is not hypothetical. This is where we are. The framework Trump announced remains deliberately vague. When pressed on whether it includes American sovereignty over Greenland, he said only that it is complex and would be explained down the line. Rutte confirmed in a Bloomberg interview that sovereignty did not come up anymore in my conversations tonight with the president. Sources indicate the deal resembles Britain's military arrangement with Cyprus, expanded American military access without territorial transfer. But no one is confirming anything, because confirming anything would collapse the fragile ambiguity holding this together. Here is the pattern that should terrify you. 18 days before threatening Greenland, on January 3, 2026, Trump's administration launched a military operation capturing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro without congressional approval, without a declaration of war. Trump then announced the United States would run Venezuela. 3 weeks later, he applied identical logic to a NATO ally. Use military force or the threat of it. Claim executive authority. Extract resources. Move on. This is not about Greenland. This is about whether American institutions, whether international alliances, whether the entire post-World War II security architecture can survive an executive branch operating without constraint. The trilateral negotiations between Denmark, Greenland, and the United States continue with no announced deadline. Rutte mentioned the phrase "within months" regarding Arctic security timelines. The tariff threat is suspended, not withdrawn. The military option was taken off the table in a single press conference and could return to it just as quickly. 200 Danish soldiers remain deployed in the Arctic. Greenlandic civilians are stockpiling food. And somewhere in the Pentagon, contingency plans for operations against a NATO ally exist that did not exist 6 months ago. The framework bought time. It did not buy resolution. And the clock is still ticking.